The first time I heard the ping, I thought it was a buoy out in the channel. That's what living in a dead harbor town does to your brain. You start explaining everything with water. Metal noise? Buoy. Strange vibration? A freighter passing offshore. That sick, deep thump you feel in your teeth at 3 in the morning? Surf, or the old breakwater settling. Anything but what it actually was. I was desperate for work. I don't like my job desperate. I mean the kind where you count your last dollars and quarters and stare at your phone like it's a life support monitor. My town used to be something: shipyard, cannery, Coast Guard money, tourists coming down for the lighthouse and the whale mural and the cheap crab. Now it was mostly empty storefronts and salt-stained plywood and old men who didn't leave. Everybody my age either moved inland or got stuck in the loop. Deckhand for a season, pills, court, rehab, back to the docks. The horizon was always there, always gray, like the ocean was sitting on our chest. I fired resumes into the void for weeks. Remote customer service, warehouse, anything. Half the listings were fake. The other half wanted certifications I didn't have. Most days I'd start strong, then the wind would come off the water with that lacerating edge, and I'd end up pressed to my own window, watching the street like I was waiting for someone to drown. It didn't help that the people left in town looked wrong. I'm not being poetic. I mean, you ever see someone who spends their whole life on the water and it starts to rewrite their face? The skin gets pale and tight, like plastic stretched over bone. Their eyes go glossy. They stop squinting at the sun and start staring through you like you're fog. The old folks in my town moved in little clusters, crossing from corner to corner, never making eye contact with each other. And yeah, I know how this sounds, but I could swear their eyes were darker than they should have been, like the pupils ate the whites, like the sea ate everything else and only left a hole. When the rain let up and the wind stopped screaming like it was trapped in rigging, I'd walk down toward the harbor to kill time. The house I was renting didn't feel home-like. It felt like a waiting room. You know that feeling where the air in a place goes stale because nobody laughs in it? It was like that. I'd sit on my own couch and hear water move somewhere it shouldn't, dripping behind walls, gurgling under the floorboards. And my mind would keep returning to the same thought. The whole town was hollow, and the ocean was the only thing still doing its job. There was a shop near the docks I started hanging around in because it was warm and it had Wi-Fi and the owner didn't kick me out immediately. It was one of those places that try to be 3 things at once because that's the only way anything survives anymore. Front half was a coffee counter with day-old muffins and burnt espresso. One corner was a bait and tackle wall, hooks, leaders, jars of something that used to be worms. The back was antiques, meaning half-rotted nautical junk pulled from estate sales. Brass sextants that didn't work, cracked ship lanterns, plaques with names of vessels that never came back. And then, like an afterthought, there was a little dive supply rack. O-rings, defog, cheap snorkels, a couple dusty BCDs hanging like dead jellyfish, and an old compressor pamphlet pinned behind the register. It was called Low Tide, stenciled in white block letters on the window. Somebody had added a smaller handwritten sign underneath. Hot coffee / cold beer / air fills by APPT. Like it was a threat. The owner's name was Donna. Everybody called her Dawn. She was built short and heavy, always in a sweatshirt that smelled like old sweat and bleach and something sour underneath, bilge, maybe, or fish left too long. Her hair was black and greasy, like she'd been under a hat for years. She had these little bead eyes that never stopped moving, needle points that stabbed at you from behind the counter. The first time she looked at me, I felt something crawl up my spine, like cold water finding a gap in your wetsuit. The shop itself was too clean for the harbor. The floor was this surgical white tile, polished hard enough that the fluorescent lights above it gleamed like a morgue. It always smelled like bleach. Not the nice pool smell. The harsh industrial kind that burns your sinuses and makes you taste metal. The coffee never covered it. The bait never covered it. It was just bleach, like she was trying to scrub something out of the air. I'd order the cheapest thing, black coffee, usually, and sit in the back booth where I could watch the whole place without looking like I was watching. I bring my notebook and pretend to write. Sometimes I actually did. I wrote whatever popped into my head, job ideas, lists, dumb lines about the way wind sounds like someone breathing through teeth. Mostly I waited for emails that never came. I watched the harbor through the fogged windows. I watched Dawn watch me. She didn't like me being there. I could tell. Not in a normal, this guy's taking up a booth way. More like I was a pressure leak she couldn't locate. Her neck vein would bulge when she spoke to me. Her voice had that crackling static edge like an old TV on a dead channel. She'd say things like, "You buying anything else?" And it would sound like the words were coming through salt water. Sometimes, when the wind outside finally died and the rain slowed to a drizzle, the shop would go unnaturally quiet. No buzz, no truck tires on wet road, just the fluorescence buzzing and the faint slap of water against pilings outside. And then I'd hear it, a metallic slam, not a drop, not a bang from the kitchen, a real impact, metal on metal, hard and flat, like someone hit a ship hull with a sledge. It would come from somewhere behind the shop, deeper than the back room. The first time it happened, I flinched so hard I spilled coffee on my notebook. Dawn froze every time. Her whole body would lock up like a diver hearing a regulator free flow. Her eyes would widen and vibrate like they were trying to leave her skull. Her hands would curl around the counter edge. And then she'd waddle like a toddler in a panic, through the little swinging door into the back. She was fast for someone her size when that sound hit. There were rules in harbor towns that nobody writes down. You don't ask about the Coast Guard boat schedule. You don't ask what's inside the locked bait freezer. You don't ask why a certain buoy always blinks in fog, even when it's out of service. And you don't follow someone into the back when they clearly don't want you there. So I didn't. At first, the slam would happen once or twice. Sometimes there'd be a scraping, like something heavy dragging along metal. Then the shop lights would flicker, dim, brighten again. Dawn would come back out, breathing hard, her face rearranged into something neutral, and she'd act like nothing happened. The first week I heard it, I convinced myself it was a pump, a compressor cycling, something settling. The shop was old. Everything down by the harbor is old because salt eats money before it eats metal. I told myself she had some machine back there, maybe the air fill setup, maybe an old ice maker, maybe a busted freezer. The sound didn't match any of that, but my brain kept trying to jam it into a normal box because normal boxes are safer. Then I started noticing the water. Not the obvious water, the harbor outside, the rain on the window, the water that wasn't supposed to be there. A damp line along the base of the wall near the antiques. Drops under the dive rack like condensation, except the shop was warm. A drip from the ceiling tile above the back door that would hit the floor in the same spot over and over, even on dry days. It always hit with this soft, obscene little splat, like something wet breathing. One afternoon, Dawn snapped at me because I had the nerve to ask if she was hiring. She looked at me like I'd asked to borrow her lungs. "You got a boat?" "No," I said. "I can work the counter. Stock, clean, whatever. People who don't got a boat don't last down here," she said. That static voice, like she was talking through a blown speaker. "You ever been under?" "Under what?" Her eyes slid past me to the window, to the harbor. "Under," she repeated like that was enough. Like everything here was under something. I felt my face get hot. "I need a job, Dawn." She leaned forward, and for a second the bleach smell got drowned by her. Old sweat, brine, something like crushed flowers left in ditch water. "Everybody needs something," she said. "Not everybody gets it." I wanted to tell her to go to hell. I wanted to tell her she wasn't special because she owned a failing shop in a failing town. But the way she said it, flat, tired, like she'd already seen my whole life, made my throat tighten. A metallic slam rolled through the shop, louder than usual, close enough that my teeth clicked. Dawn's face changed. Not fear exactly, more like resignation, like someone hearing a timer go off. "It's fine," she said quickly, like she was talking to herself. Then she shot me a look sharp enough to cut fishing line. "Don't move." I wasn't. "Don't," she hissed. She vanished through the back door. The shop lights flickered. The fluorescent buzzed deepened into a lower hum. The drip above the back door sped up, like something had increased the pressure behind it. I sat there with my coffee, suddenly aware of how alone I was in that booth, how the shop felt less like a store and more like a sealed container. I could hear something in the back now, not just the metal, a wet sound, like a mop dragging over tile, like a seal flopping. Then, through it all, a slow, rhythmic tapping began. Not the slam, something smaller, a deliberate knock, spaced out like code. Top, top, top. It wasn't coming from the door. It felt like it was coming from below, up through the floor, through the bones of the building. Like the shop was a hull, and something was outside of it, testing. The tapping stopped. Silence rushed in so fast, it made my ears ring. Dawn came back out a minute later. Her face was too smooth. She'd pulled it into a mask. Her hands were shaking, but she kept them below the counter. "Everything okay?" I asked because my mouth hates me. She stared at me for a long moment. The needle points. Then she said, "You don't want to be here when the water turns." What does that even mean? I tried to laugh, but it came out thin. The water's always. "Go," she said. Just that. No explanation. No anger. Like she was granting me mercy she didn't fully believe in. I should have gone then. That's the truth. I should have taken the hint, grabbed my notebook, and walked right out into the salt wind and never come back. But I didn't have anywhere else to go that didn't cost money. And pride is a stupid anchor. So I kept coming back. Over the next few weeks, I learned Dawn's rhythms. The way she wiped the counter in the same pattern every time, like she was tracing a circle. The way she kept a little radio behind the register, turned low to a weather station even when the forecast was clear. The way her eyes flicked to the back door every time a gull screamed. I also learned the town's rhythms. Sunday mornings, everyone went to Seafarers Church on the hill. Brutal as concrete. One huge steel cross bolted to the front with Christ Saves hammered into it like a warning. The letters looked like they'd been punched in with a cold chisel, uneven and brutal, as if the message had to be screamed against wind. The old folks filed in with their tight, pale skin and their black eyes and their raincoats smelling like wet rope. They didn't sing. I'd pass by sometimes and hear nothing but the low murmur of a preacher and the occasional cough, like a ship full of people pretending not to notice the leak. I never went in. I tried once when I first moved here, because you're supposed to try. I stood at the door and looked at the faces turning toward me, blank, dark-eyed, and I felt like I was standing at the edge of a drop-off with no bottom. I left. On Sundays, low tide was open anyway. Dawn said it was for the ones who can't sit still. She didn't look at me when she said it. Those Sundays were the only times the harbor felt calm. No tourists, no charter boats, just the slap of water on pilings and the occasional horn from a ship moving slow in fog. The town would go quiet enough that you could hear your own blood if you tried. It was on a Sunday that everything finally broke. It was late morning. The church crowd would have been halfway through their service. I remember because the big steel cross on the hill caught a weak sunbeam between clouds and flashed like a signal mirror. The wind had died. The rain had stopped. The harbor sat under a lid of fog that made the water look like oil. I walked in a low tide, and the bleach smell hit me like a slap. Dawn was behind the counter, hair slicked back, eyes already tired. She didn't greet me. "Coffee," I said. She poured it without asking. Cheap, instant, always mixed like crap, clumps floating like sediment. I paid with singles. She didn't count them. She never did. It's like money wasn't the thing she cared about. I slid into my usual booth in the back. The antiques stared at me from shelves, a ship's bell with a nameplate that had been scratched out, a compass that pointed wrong, a framed photo of a crew standing in front of a trawler, their faces blurred like someone had wiped them away with a wet thumb. There was a big glass jar on a high shelf that I hadn't noticed before. It was filled with something pale and coiled, floating in cloudy liquid. When the fluorescence flickered, it looked like it moved. I try not to look at it. The drip above the back door hit the tile, slow and steady. Drip, drip, drip. It was the only sound besides the low hum of the lights. I took a sip of coffee and got a mouthful of gritty clump. It stuck to my tongue like wet sand. I gagged, swallowed anyway, felt it slide down my throat like sludge. I remember thinking, stupidly, that even my coffee couldn't give me a break. Like the town itself was offended by the idea of comfort. Then the lights went out. Not a flicker, not a dim. They just died, silent as a knife in water. The shop went from more bright to black in an instant, and the darkness felt heavy, like depth, like pressure. My eyes adjusted just enough to make out shapes. The glow of the weather radio behind the counter, the faint gray of fog pressing against the windows, the outline of the back door. For a split second, everything held its breath. Then the metallic slam hit. It wasn't one slam. It was a series, rapturous against the silence. Bang, bang, bang. The sound came from below, from behind, from everywhere. The tile under my feet trembled like a deck taking a wave. Something in the antiques rattled. A lantern swung on its hook. Dawn made a noise that wasn't a scream and wasn't a sob. She gripped the counter like she was holding onto a rail in a storm. Her eyes were wide, reflecting the little green glow of the radio like drowned lights. "No," she whispered. Her voice crackled, broke. "No, no, no." "Dawn." I stood up, chair scraping loud in the dark. "What the hell is that?" She didn't answer me. She wasn't hearing me. She was listening to the slams like they were words. The slams stopped. Silence again, thick enough to choke on. Then came the tapping. Top, top, top. Slow, deliberate, like someone knocking on a door that was never meant to open. Dawn's shoulders started shaking. Her breath came in ragged little pulls. "It should have been enough," she said, and her voice sounded older than her body. "I should have been enough." "What are you talking about?" I snapped because fear makes me mean. "Enough for what?" "Dawn, if you got some kind of..." She turned her head toward me, just a fraction, and in the darkness her eyes looked like two wet holes. "You don't get to talk," she said, and for the first time her voice wasn't static. It was clear, cold. "You don't get to ask." "I'm not. I'm just trying to." "You're sitting in my booth like you live here," she hissed. "You're breathing my air. You don't even know what's under you." That sentence hit me harder than the slams. I felt suddenly, vividly, the space beneath the tile. The idea of a hollow under the shop. The harbor right there, the water pressing against foundations, the whole building like a thin shell. A wet gurgle came from behind the back door. Not plumbing. Something alive. Dawn's face twisted like she was trying not to cry. She wiped her mouth with the back of her hand, smearing something dark. "Stay," she said, but it wasn't a command. It was a plea. "Just stay still. Don't make it notice you." "Make what?" She was already moving. Fast, panicked waddle run toward the back. She yanked the swinging door open and disappeared into the dark like she was stepping off a dock in a black water. I laughed and it came out wrong. A harsh bark in the dark. I hate myself for it, but I did. The whole thing felt so unreal. The lights out, the slams, her shaking like a scared kid. Part of my brain still clung to normal. Power outage. Loose pipe. Some machine in the back. Dawn being dramatic. Then I heard the wet squelching. It was close. Too close. A sound like bare feet on soaked carpet. Like a fish dropped on a deck. Dawn made a small noise, muffled, like she'd been grabbed. I froze with my hands on the back of the booth, heart punching my ribs. I stared at the back door like staring could make it open itself. There was a sharp scream, cut off mid-breath. Then a noise that didn't belong in a coffee shop. It was industrial, mechanical, like an accident on a rig, like heavy equipment meeting flesh. A grind, a snap, a wet pop. Bone crunching so loud I felt it through the soles of my shoes. The walls trembled. Something heavy slammed against something else. The antiques rattled again. The smell changed. Bleach got drowned by brine, by rot, by that thick, warm stink of something that's been underwater too long. It rolled out from under the back door in a humid wave and coated my tongue. I tasted salt and metal like I'd been a penny. I didn't move. I couldn't. My legs locked like they were waiting for pressure, equalization. My brain, stupid and stubborn, tried to picture a normal explanation and failed. There are only so many things that make that sound. None of them are good. The back room went quiet. Not empty quiet. Listening quiet. I heard a slow dragging, like something heavy being pulled across tile. Then, closer, a sound like lips smacking. Like feeding. My coffee cup was still in my hand. I don't remember picking it up. I took a sip without thinking, and the heat burned my tongue, and it grounded me just enough to move. I backed away from the booth, slow, keeping my eyes on the back door. My chair bumped the table, and the little clink made my skin jump. I eased toward the front of the shop, toward the windows, toward the faint gray fog light outside. The door to the street was locked. Of course it was. Dawn always locked it on Sundays and let people in if she recognized them, because she didn't trust strangers. My hands shook as I fumbled with the deadbolt. The metal felt slick, cold as a dive knife. Behind me, something tapped. Not on the floor. On the back door. Talp, talp, talp. Like it knew exactly where I was. Like it could smell heat. I finally got the bolt turned. The door stuck, swollen from moisture. I yanked it with both hands, and it opened with a wet sigh. Fog hit me like cold breath. The harbor smell, diesel, seaweed, fish, wrapped around my face. It should have felt like relief. Instead, it felt like stepping out of one container into a bigger one. I stumbled onto the sidewalk. The streetlights were out too. The whole town was dark under fog, like someone had killed the power at the source. Somewhere out on the water, a buoy bell clanged once, slow and mournful, then stopped. I turned back toward the shop out of reflex and saw nothing through the windows but my own reflection, pale and distorted in the dark glass. For a second, my reflection didn't match my movements. For a second, it looked like someone else standing behind me, close with a face pressed to the glass from the inside. Then I blinked and it was just me. I ran. I didn't run toward home. Home was uphill, away from the harbor, but my feet took me sideways, down between buildings, into the dockside maze of alleys and storage sheds and fish processors that shut down years ago. Fog swallowed the street. My world shrank to wet pavement under my shoes and my own breath ripping in and out. I could hear water everywhere, dripping from gutters, puddles sucking at my soles. Somewhere below the dock planks, the harbor water slapping and sucking like a mouth. Behind me, I swear I heard another slam. Not from the shop, from somewhere deeper, like metal ringing through the ground. Like the whole harbor was a hull, and something enormous had bumped it from below. I cut down an alley between two warehouses that smelled like rust and old nets. My hand shot out to steady myself against the wall and came away slick with grime. The fog was thicker here, trapped between buildings. It muffled everything, even my own footsteps, so it felt like I was running underwater. Halfway down the alley, my foot hit something soft, and I went down hard. I landed in a heap of trash, discarded nets, damp cardboard, fish boxes kelp thrown out to rot. Something warm soaked my hands immediately. Not rainwater, not harbor water. Warm, thick, clinging. I tried to push myself up, and my palm sank into something that gave like fruit. My fingers slid into a pulpy mass that squeezed back, slow and weak, like the maw of a sluggish animal licking. The sensation was wrong in a way my body understood faster than my brain. It was sensual, disgusting, intimate. Warm suction around my hand, a lazy pull like something tasting me. I made a sound, half yell, half sob, and yanked my hand back, whatever it was held on for a second, reluctant, then let go as if it didn't have the strength to keep me. My skin crawled so hard it hurt. I scrambled backward, boots slipping on slime. The fog pressed in. I couldn't see what I'd fallen into, just a dark mound glistening wet. Then it moved, not a full shift, a ripple like muscle under skin, like something breathing. From somewhere in the trash heap, a sobbing sound started. Soft at first, like a neglected pet whining. Then it caught in something clogged and infected, came out wet and muffled, like it was pushing through an orifice full of meat. The sobbing had a rhythm, and it reminded me of the tapping, of the way Dawn had listened like it was language. I backed up until my spine hit the warehouse wall. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely wipe the warm slime off on my jeans. The smell hit me then, brine and rot, and something like low-tide mud mixed with blood. It filled my nose and made my stomach flip. The sobbing shifted into something else. A wet inhale, a noise like lips shaping sound. And then, in the fog, I heard my name. Not from a human throat, not from a mouth. Like it was being pushed through water, distorted and wrong. Like a voice coming through a bad radio. I don't know how it knew my name. That's the part that still wakes me up. I bolted. I didn't look back. I just ran blind, bouncing off walls, turning corners without thinking, following the faintest sense of open space. My lungs burned. My mouth tasted like salt and coffee and fear. The town was dead. No cars. No porch lights. No dogs barking. The fog made it feel like the ocean had come ashore and swallowed everything whole. My shoes splashed through shallow puddles that shouldn't have been there. Every storm drain I passed sounded like it was breathing. Once I heard that sobbing again, farther away, like it was following through pipes. Once I heard tapping, faint from beneath the pavement, keeping time with my heart. Somewhere near the edge of the harbor district, the ground sloped upward and the buildings thinned. I ran past the old cannery, windows busted, doors chained. The chain links were wet, shining. The air got colder. The fog thinned just enough for me to see the outline of the hill, and above it, the steel cross of Seafarers Church, black against the gray. I could hear something from the church then. Not singing, not a sermon. A low murmur that rose and fell like waves. It made my skin prickle. It sounded like a crowd speaking in unison without moving their lips. I kept running. By the time the sky started to pale, I was out near the marshy field at the edge of town where the road turns into nothing and the land flattens into reeds. My legs finally gave out and I stumbled into the wet grass and fell on my back, staring up at the thinning fog. The dawn came slow and sickly, a yellowing decay staining the sky as it bloomed across the horizon. The water in the marsh reflected it like old oil. Somewhere far out, a foghorn moaned, long and lonely, and it felt like the world exhaling after holding its breath all night. I lay there shaking, listening for footsteps, for sobbing, for tapping. All I heard was the wind coming back soft, the reeds whispering, the distant slap of water. When the town lights finally blinked back on, one by one like weak eyes opening, I got up and walked home on legs that didn't feel like mine. I never went back to low tide. At least, not that day. I kept picturing Dawn's face, the way she'd said it should have been enough, like she'd been paying something, feeding something. I kept seeing my hand sinking into that warm trash heap, the lazy suction, the sobbing voice pushing my name through fog. I told myself it was just a freak thing, a homeless person, an animal, a busted pipe full of sludge that shifted when I fell. Anything but what my gut knew. There was something in this town that lived in the places water touches, under floors, in drains, in the dark space between harbor and street. Something that knocked on metal like it owned the hull. Back in my house, I scrubbed my hands until my skin burned. I showered so hot my lungs hurt from steam. The whole time, I kept thinking I heard dripping where there shouldn't be water. A soft plink from somewhere behind the bathroom wall. A gurgle from the sink that sounded like a throat clearing. I tried to sleep and couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt pressure in my ears like I was descending. I'd swallow, yawn, try to pop them, and the pressure would stay stubborn like I was still under something. By afternoon, my phone finally buzzed with an email. Not a rejection, not spam, a job offer. It was from a salvage outfit based 2 towns over. Temporary contract, marine recovery support. Mostly deck work, paperwork, running comms on a small vessel. They needed someone immediately for an offshore assignment tied to a government lease. Good pay, no benefits, lodging provided. Start in 48 hours. I stared at the screen until my eyes watered. I should have been happy. This was what I'd been begging for. A way out, money, motion, salt air that wasn't stuck in a dying harbor. Instead, my stomach sank, because at the bottom of the email, under the contact info, there was a line that looked like a joke until my brain connected it to the night before. Report 2, low tide coffee and marine supply, pickup point. Ask for Dawn. My hands went cold. I read it again, slower. Same words, same place. Pickup point. As if the shop wasn't a shop. As if it was a dock. A hatch. Outside, the wind shifted, and for a second, I heard it. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. Talp, talp, talp? Like a buoy bell, like a knuckle on metal, like something patient knocking from the wrong side of the world. I sat on my couch in my bleach-scented, water-haunted house and waited, stupidly, for the town to do what it always did. For the old folks with their black eyes and their tight, pale skin to pass my window and pretend not to see me. For their faces to tighten when they looked up like plastic stretching. Because now I knew something they'd always known. And I could feel deep in my bones that whatever was under low tide hadn't finished eating. I tried to convince myself it was a clerical mistake. That salvage company was real. I Googled them with shaking hands, scrolling through a website that looked like it hadn't been updated since 2012. Photos of men in hard hats on a barge. A logo with an anchor. A phone number that wasn't a scam line. Reviews from marinas. They pull my skiff out in a day. Good work, pricey. Normal stuff. But that line in the email, report to low tide, ask for Dawn, kept crawling back into my brain like a hook set too deep. I didn't answer right away. I sat there on my couch, staring at the window, listening to my house. Every drip in the pipes felt like a code. Every time the refrigerator kicked on, I flinched like it was a slam from below. I held my breath and waited for tapping to start under the floorboards. Around dusk, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't pick up. Then I did, because desperation is a leash. Yeah, my voice came out hoarse. A man's voice answered, low and irritated, like he was chewing on something. You the one who applied for recovery support? Who is this? Name's Lyle. I run the deck side on the Hannah B. He said it like I should know what that meant. You want the job, or you want to keep playing games? Yes, I want the job. But why does it say to report to that shop? A pause. I could hear water in the background on his end, the slap of waves against hull. And something else, faint, rhythmic like a sonar ping bleeding into the call. Because that's where we pick up, he said finally. Don't overthink it. You show up with boots and a duffel. You don't talk to locals. You don't wander. You don't get drunk. You don't touch shit that ain't yours. You hear me? I swallowed. I was there yesterday. The power went out. There was something. He laughed once, sharp and humorless. Yeah, that town does that. You know, Dawn. Another pause, longer this time. The water sound behind him got louder, like he'd moved closer to an open hatch. Dawn don't matter, he said. You want out of that shithole, you get on the boat. Tomorrow morning. 6 sharp. Low tide. Don't be late. I have questions. Everybody does. You can ask him at sea, or you can stay on land and keep starving. His voice turned colder. Don't bring a weapon. Don't bring a camera. Don't bring any bright ideas. Just bring yourself. The call ended. No wudbie. No click, just dead air. I stared at my phone, waiting for it to ring again like it would explain itself. It didn't. That night, I tried to sleep and failed. I kept seeing Dawn's back disappearing through the door. Kept hearing that industrial crunch. Kept feeling that warm suction on my hand, like something tasting me, testing if I'd fit. At some point after midnight, I went to the bathroom and stood over the sink. I turned the faucet on just a little, watched the water run thin and clear. The sound should have been comforting. Instead, it made my ears ache with pressure, like I was descending again. In the mirror, my eyes looked wrong. Not black, not like the old folks. Just too dark around the edges. Like I hadn't slept in weeks. Like something inside me was making room. When I shut the faucet off, the drain gurgled. And for a split second, I heard it. Talp, talp, talp. Not from the pipes. From inside my skull, like someone knocking on the inside of a helmet. I showed up anyway. The sky was still dark at 5:30, that pre-dawn slate where the ocean and the clouds are the same color and the world feels unfinished. Fog sat low over the harbor, and the streetlights made it glow in sick cones. Low tide sign was lit. That shouldn't have been possible. I'd watched the whole town go dark when the power went out. I'd felt how deep that blackout was, like a hand over a mouth. And now the shop window glowed warm yellow like nothing had ever happened. I stood across the street for a full minute, duffel strap biting into my shoulder, watching the place like it might lunge. The floor inside looked just as surgical white. The fluorescents were on. The dive rack hung in the same spot. The antiques sat on their shelves like bodies arranged for viewing. The door opened before I touched it. Dawn stood there, framed by the light, like she'd been waiting the whole time. I almost dropped my bag. She looked cleaner, hair brushed, fresh sweatshirt. Even her face looked smoother, like the fear wrinkles had been ironed out. She was smiling, but it wasn't friendly. It was practiced. "You're late," she said. "It's 5:40. I snapped because my fear always comes out as anger. You were..." Inside, she cut in. Her voice had that static edge again, like she was speaking through a wet speaker. "Don't stand on the street like a lost kid." I didn't move. I stared at her, searching for a sign that she was real, that she hadn't been killed in that back room, that my brain hadn't made up the whole crunching nightmare. "You're alive," I said dumbly. Her smile widened just a fraction. Everybody's alive until they're not. "What the hell happened yesterday?" My voice shook. "I heard you scream." "I heard." Her eyes sharpened. "You heard a lot of things you don't understand." "I heard you die." Something passed over her face. Annoyance, maybe. Or something like pity. You hear waves all day, and you start hearing voices and foam. You'll learn. Or you won't. My skin prickled. "You called me. You sent that email." "I didn't send shit," she said, and now her voice was clear again, cold like before. "They sent it. They pick up here. That's the arrangement." "What arrangement?" I pushed because I needed her to say something that made sense. "What's under your shop?" Her nostrils flared. For the first time, her smile slipped. "You want to go back there?" she asked softly. "You want to see?" I didn't answer because my throat wouldn't let me. She stepped closer. The bleach smell hit me, sharp enough to sting. Under was brine. Under that was something warmer and sweeter, like rot. "You got a choice," she murmured. "You can get on that boat and do what they tell you. Or you can stay here and keep asking questions until the water turns again." "The water turns," I repeated. "What does that mean?" Dawn's gaze slid past me, out toward the harbor. The fog was thinning. A buoy bell clanged once, slow, like a heartbeat. "It means it gets hungry," she said. My stomach dropped. A truck horn blared somewhere down by the docks. A pair of headlights cut through fog. A white utility truck rolled up, salt-crusted along the wheel wells, a company logo on the door I recognized from the website. Behind it, a flatbed carried crates and coiled hoses and a compressor that looked like it had been dragged through hell and rinsed in seawater. A man leaned out the driver window. "You," he barked. Dawn turned her smile back on, like flipping a switch. "That's him." I tightened my grip on my bag. "Dawn." She leaned in close enough that I could smell her breath. It was coffee and bleach and something faintly metallic. "Don't say my name on the water," she whispered. "Don't say it near drains. Don't say it near metal." "Why?" Her eyes looked almost black in the morning light. "Because it listens," she said, and then she stepped back and waved me toward the truck like a hostess seating a customer. I wanted to run. I wanted to throw my duffel and sprint uphill toward the church and pound on the brutal concrete until someone answered. I wanted anything that wasn't stepping into this like I'd been selected. But my bank account was empty. My stomach was hollow, and the ocean was right there, watching. So I walked. The guy in the truck looked me over like I was a piece of gear. Late 40s, beard like wire, hands scarred and thick. "Lyle." He spat out the window. "You ready to work?" he asked. "Where are we going?" I asked back. He snorted. "Offshore." That's not an answer. He leaned closer, his eyes flat. "You want details?" You should have joined the Navy. Get in the truck. I got in. As we pulled away, I glanced back at low tide. Dawn stood in the doorway, small and solid, arms crossed like she owned the street. Behind her, through the glass, I saw my reflection for a moment. And behind my reflection, deeper in the shop, something moved where there shouldn't have been movement. Not a person, not an animal. A slow, pale shift like a shape passing behind frosted water. I whipped my head around, and the shop was just a shop again. Lights, tile, antiques. Dawn lifted one hand and tapped her knuckles against the doorframe, slow and deliberate. Talp, talp, talp. The sound didn't reach me through the street noise, but my ears ached like it did. We drove down to the industrial pier where the salvage boats tied up behind a chain-link fence. The harbor smell got stronger. Diesel, kelp, fish rot, oil. The water down there was black, thick, rippling like it didn't trust the sky. The Hanabi wasn't a big ship. It was a workboat, ugly and functional, with a small crane, a cluttered aft deck, and a cabin that looked like it had been welded together in a hurry. Paint flaked off in sheets. Rust bled down the hull in orange tears. A coil of hose lay like a sleeping snake. The kind of vessel that doesn't have a personality because it's too busy surviving. Two other guys were already on deck. One was younger than me, maybe mid-20s, thin and twitchy, eyes darting everywhere. The other was older, bald, with a face like he'd been carved from driftwood. Neither smiled. I'll toss my duffel onto the deck. That's Nick. He jerked his chin at the twitchy guy. That's Rudd. Don't be a problem. You got steel toes. Yeah. You got seasick pills? No. Then you're gonna learn quick. He waved at a pile of gear near the stern. Put on a vest. We're leaving before the coasties start asking why. I looked around instinctively for the Coast Guard station, the patrol boat, anything official. There was nothing. Just fog and gulls, and the harbor water slapping the pilings like it was trying to chew through. As we cast off, I felt something in my chest loosen, relief mixed with dread. Land fell away behind us, that dead town shrinking into gray. The lighthouse on the point stood like a tooth. The church cross glinted faintly on the hill, a cold blade against sky. Nick stood near the rail, chewing his thumbnail until it bled. You from here? He asked. I almost didn't answer because small talk felt wrong, but his voice had an edge to it, like he needed to talk to stay anchored. Yeah, I said. You? He snorted. No, thank God. He glanced toward the shore. That place is off. You don't know the half of it. Rudd looked up from coiling a rope. His voice was gravel. Don't start. Nick's eyes widened a little. What? I'm just saying. Rudd cut him off with a stare. We're on water now. Keep your mouth clean. Nick swallowed. He looked at me like he wanted to ask 100 questions, then looked away, jaw tight. I followed Lyle into the cabin for a briefing, which was really just him tossing a folder onto a table sticky with old coffee and salt. Here's what you need to know, he said. We're not pulling someone's ski boat. We're not playing hero. We're doing a recovery job under contract. Government lease. That means you don't talk about it. You don't post about it. You don't even think about it too loud. What are we recovering? I asked. Lyle's eyes flicked to the ceiling like he was listening for something. Then he leaned forward and lowered his voice. A module. A module, I repeated. Like a container? Underwater module, he said. Research habitat. Listening post. Whatever you want to call it. It's on the bottom in a restricted zone. Something went wrong. We're going to haul gear, run comms, and babysit the ROV while the suits do their shit. Suits. Divers, he said like I was stupid. Not you. Your support. You keep your hands to yourself, and you do what you're told. Why'd you pick me up from that shop? I pushed because it was the thing burning in me. Why not the marina? Lyle stared at me for a long beat. His face tightened. Because that's where the paperwork says, he said finally. And because Dawn keeps the wrong people away. The wrong people from what? He slammed his palm on the table, hard enough to make the coffee cups rattle. From this conversation, he snapped. Stop digging. You want to be a martyr? Go join a church. You want to eat? You work. My heartbeat thundered. I wanted to punch him. I I wanted to grab him by the collar and shake him until answers fell out. But he was bigger and meaner, and I was trapped on a boat with him and miles of water in every direction. So I swallowed it. Lyle's voice dropped again, more controlled. Look, you want to survive offshore, you follow rules. Here, I'll make it simple. He grabbed a marker and wrote on the whiteboard bolted to the cabin wall. His handwriting was blocky and impatient. 1. If you hear tapping on the hull, you don't tap back. 2. If comms go dead and you still hear voices, you don't answer. 3. If sonar pings start coming too fast, you tell me and you shut the system down. 4. If you see lights under us that aren't ours, you don't stare. 5. If someone says the word open, you leave the cabin. He capped the marker and looked at me like he was daring me to laugh. I didn't. Nick, who'd followed us in, stared at the list, pale. Is this a joke? Rudd stepped into the cabin behind him and shut the door. No, he said, and there was something final in his voice. I tried to keep my voice steady. Why those rules? Lyle's jaw clenched. Because the ocean's full of shit that ain't on your National Geographic documentaries, he said. And because last crew didn't follow rules, and now there's a module on the bottom full of nobody. The cabin went quiet except for the engine hum and the faint hiss of the VHF. I tasted metal. We ran for hours. The sea got rougher as we left the shelter of the bay. The Hannah slammed into swells, the hull groaning like it hated its own bones. Spray soaked the deck. My clothes stuck to my skin. Salt dried on my lips until they cracked. By midday, we were out far enough that the water changed color, darker, deeper like ink. The sky stayed gray. The horizon was a blunt line. There were no other boats. No birds. Just water and the low throb of the engine, constant as a pulse. I tried to eat a sandwich and couldn't. My stomach rolled. The smell of diesel mixed with salt and made me gag. Nick looked worse, green around the mouth. You okay? I asked him when we were alone near the stern. He laughed weakly. No, but I've been not okay since they hired me. He wiped his mouth with his sleeve. You ever do this kind of work? No, me neither, he said, and his eyes flicked to the water like he expected something to rise. They told me it was easy. Just watch a screen, they said. Just help with gear. He swallowed hard. Then I saw the rules. You know about the shop? I asked quietly. About Dawn. Nick's face tightened. I know she's not normal, he said. I went in there once to pick up a fill for my cousin's scuba tank. She watched me like she was counting, like she was measuring how much water I had in me. That's exactly it, I muttered. Rudd's voice came from behind us. Stop talking like that. We both jumped. Rudd stood there with a coil of cable over his shoulder, eyes narrowed. You want to get people killed, you keep chewing on it. You want to go home, you shut up and work. Nick bristled. Why are you acting like? Rudd stepped closer, his face inches from Nick's. Because I've been out here when it goes wrong, he growled. And you haven't. You think the ocean gives a shit about your curiosity? Nick's jaw clenched. He looked like he wanted to swing. For a second, I thought fists were about to fly on the deck, salt spray whipping around us. And part of me wanted it. Wanted the heat of a fight to drown out the cold dread. Then Lyle barked from the cabin. ROV's up in 10. Everybody move. The moment snapped. Nick backed off, muttering. Rudd turned away like nothing happened. But the tension stayed, buzzing like current. When we reached the coordinates, the sea went strangely calm. Not glassy, not pretty, calm like a hell breath. Lyle slowed the engine. The Hannah drifted. Rudd and Nick hauled the ROV frame into position at the stern. It was a yellow, boxy thing with cameras and lights and manipulator arms, cables snaking back to a control console in the cabin. The kind of machine that lets you touch depth without dying. Lyle leaned over the GPS, then over the sonar display. The screen showed the bottom far below, a dark line with occasional bumps. Then, as the unit pinged again, something else appeared, a shape that made my throat tighten. It looked like a grid. Lines too straight to be rock. Angles too clean. A rectangle like a building. And next to it, another shape, curved like something grown rather than built. Lyle's face went hard. There, he said. What is that? I asked before I could stop myself. He shot me a look. That's what we're here for. The ROV went into the water with a splash. The cable paid out, humming as it slid through the pulley. The console screens flickered, then stabilized. The camera feed was initially a blur of bubbles and green water. Then, as it descended, the light dimmed and the world became a tunnel of darkness pierced by the ROV's beams. I leaned in to spite myself. I could not. The ocean swallowed light in layers. First, the surface glitter disappeared. Then the last hint of blue. Then there was only black, thick and pressing. The ROV lights carving out a small cone of visibility like a flashlight in a cave. Particles floated in the beam. Marine snow, silt, life too small to name. The ROV's thrusters kicked gently, stirring trails like smoke. The sonar pinged, steady. Ping, ping, ping. Each ping felt like it echoed inside my teeth. Depth? Lyle asked. Rudd read off numbers. 800, 900, 1,000. Nick sat at the console, hands white-knuckled on the controls. His eyes were wide. Jesus, he whispered. Don't say that. Rudd snapped without looking away from the screen. Nick shut his mouth. At around 1,200 meters, the first thing appeared. A light. Not ours. A faint blue glow, far off in the darkness, like a star seen through dirty water. It pulsed once slow, then again. Nick froze. Is that? Don't stare, Lyle said quietly, and for the first time his voice wasn't angry. It was afraid. I realized I was holding my breath. The ROV continued descending. The blue light stayed in the distance, always just beyond the edge of the beam, pulsing like a heartbeat. When the seafloor finally came into view, it wasn't what I expected. I thought it would be mud, rock, maybe some scattered debris. Instead, it looked like an empty street. I know how insane that sounds, but the ROV beams swept across a flat plane of silt with straight edges cutting through it. Channels. Lines. A right-angle corner like a curb. Shapes rising out of the bottom like low walls, covered in growth, barnacles clinging to them like scabs. And then the module appeared. It sat half buried in silt, tilted slightly, like it had been dropped and punched into the seabed. It was a cylindrical habitat with hatches and portholes, the kind you see in glossy brochures about undersea living, except this one looked bruised. Panels were dented. One porthole was spiderwebbed with cracks. A cable ran from its side into darkness, disappearing into one of those straight channels. The habitat lights were on, soft amber glows behind the portholes, like someone left the living room lamp on. No one spoke for a moment, even Lyle. Then the sonar started pinging faster. Ping, 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 ping. Lyle slapped the console. Shut it down. Nick fumbled, eyes frantic. I didn't change anything. Shut it down, Lyle repeated, voice rising. Nick killed the sonar. The cabin went abruptly quiet except for the engine hum. In that quiet, a sound came through the speakers. Static at first, low and crackling. Then a voice. Not from our radios. Not from the VHF. From the ROV's mic, picking up something in the water. It sounded like someone trying to speak through a mouth full of seawater. Open. Nick jerked back like he'd been burned. Did you hear that? Rudd's face went pale. He looked at Lyle. Rule 5, he whispered. Lyle's eyes flicked to the cabin door, like it might slam shut on its own. Everybody out, he said. What? I blurted. Out. He barked, and suddenly he was all rage again because rage was easier than fear. Now, we scrambled. Nick nearly tripped over a coil of cable. I shoved the cabin door open, and the wind hit my face cold and wet. The deck rocked under my boots, the sea calm but heavy, like it was waiting. We stood outside, clustered like idiots, staring at the cabin door. We just fled like it was contaminated. The voice continued faintly through the closed door, muffled by metal. Open, open. It wasn't a demand. It was a request. Soft, almost pleading. Nick's eyes were huge. It sounds like, don't, Rudd hissed. Lyle lit a cigarette with shaking hands, and took a hard drag like he was trying to fill his lungs with something other than salt air. "It ain't anyone you know," he said. "It ain't anyone you can help. But it's coming from a module," Nick whispered, voice cracking. "Right? It's someone inside." Lyle exhaled smoke. "There's nobody inside," he said, and his voice went flat. "That's the whole point." Nick shook his head, hair whipping in wind. "Then what the fuck is that voice?" Rudd stared at the water, jaw clenched. "It's what's left," he said quietly. We waited until the voice stopped. It didn't stop like a person stopping. It faded like a radio signal losing strength, like it was being pulled away. When Lyle finally let us back into the cabin, the air inside felt colder, even with the engine heat. The whiteboard rules stared at me like they were laughing. Lyle forced his hands steady and turned the screens back on. The ROV camera still pointed at the module. The porthole lights glowed, and in one of the cracked portholes, a shadow moved. Not a fish, not a piece of kelp swaying. A shape passing behind glass like a person walking by in a hallway. Nick made a small choking sound. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no." The shadow moved again, slower this time, like it knew we were watching. I leaned closer without meaning to, forehead almost against the monitor. The glass on the porthole had cracks like a spiderweb. Behind it, that amber light flickered. And then, in the reflection on the porthole glass, I saw something that wasn't there. A face, not in the water. In the reflection, like a mirror showing a different angle. A pale, tight face pressed close, eyes too dark, skin like plastic stretched over bone. It looked like one of the old folks from town. It looked like Dawn. I jerked back so hard I slammed into the cabin wall. My heart hammered. "What?" Nick gasped. Nothing. I lied because if I said it out loud, it would become real. Lyle didn't look at me. He was staring at the module with a kind of exhausted hatred. "We're not going down," he said. "We're running the ROV. We're attaching lift lines. We're getting the module to shallow water where the Navy boys can deal with it." The Navy. I latched onto that. "This is military?" Lyle's lip curled. "Everything's military when it starts talking back." He pointed at the screen. "Rudd, guide the arm. Nick, keep it steady. You," he jabbed a finger at me. "You monitor the tether tension and watch for changes. If you see anything that ain't supposed to be there, you say it. Not later. Not after you think. Immediately." "What changes?" I asked. Lyle's eyes flicked to me, and for a second I saw something raw behind them. "If the bottom moves," he said. He didn't say more. We worked. The ROV drifted closer to the module, lights cutting through silt. The manipulator arm reached out like a careful hand. It latched onto a metal ring welded to the module's frame. Rudd's fingers moved with practiced precision on the controls, even though his face stayed tight. Nick sweated visibly, lips trembling. "This is wrong," he muttered. "This is so fucking wrong." "Shut up and hold it steady," Rudd snapped. Nick glared. "Don't talk to me like you want to die arguing." Rudd shot back, and it wasn't a rhetorical question. He sounded like he meant it. "You want to get distracted and swing the tether into the hatch and hear what comes out?" Nick went white and shut his mouth. The ROV's arm secured one line, then another. Then it drifted to the side to wrap a strap around a damaged section. As the ROV moved along the module's curve, the camera swept past the main hatch. The hatch was open a crack, just enough to show darkness inside. Lyle swore under his breath. "It shouldn't be." Rudd stiffened. "They said it was sealed." Nick's voice was a whisper. "Maybe it wasn't when they left." "No one left." Lyle snapped, and then he stopped himself, like he'd almost said something he wasn't supposed to. The ROV hovered in front of the hatch. The gap looked like a mouth barely parted. From inside, a thin stream of bubbles rose, slow and steady, like the module was breathing out. My ears popped. I swallowed, tried to clear them. The pressure feeling returned in my skull, like I was sinking even though I was on a boat. Then the tapping started, not on the hull, on the ROV mic. A faint metallic knock, hollow and deliberate. Talp, talp, talp. Nick's hands froze on the controls. "No," he breathed. The tapping came again, closer. Talp, talp, talp. Like something inside the module was knocking on the hatch from within. Lyle's face twisted. Pull back, he ordered. Back off. Rudd guided the ROV away, thrusters stirring silt. The camera swung, showing the straight channels in the seabed again, those impossible angles. As the ROV backed away, the tapping followed. It didn't get quieter. It got louder, as if the sound wasn't traveling through water at all, as if it was traveling through metal, through signal, through us. Talp, talp, talp. Nick's eyes darted around the cabin like he expected the sound to come from the walls. It's in here, he whispered. Lyle slammed the console again. Ignore it. The ROV pulled further back. The module stayed in the beam, lights glowing, hatch cracked, bubbles rising. The tapping stopped. For a second, relief flickered. Then the voice came back through the speakers, clearer than before. Open. It wasn't coming from a module now. It was coming from somewhere else. The ROV camera panned accidentally as Nick flinched, and the beam swept across the seafloor beyond the module. There was a doorway there, a perfectly rectangular door frame jutting up from bare rock and silt like someone had planted a piece of a building in the ocean floor. It stood upright, too straight, too ordinary. No corrosión, no growth. It looked like poured concrete, smooth and clean in the ROV light. And beyond the frame, there was darkness that didn't behave like water darkness. It wasn't full of particles. It didn't swirl. It was flat, like a void, like a room. My skin went cold in a way I can't explain. Nick's breath hitched. What is that? Rudd leaned closer, eyes wide despite himself. That wasn't on the charts. Lyle's cigarette dropped from his fingers and burned a hole in the cabin floor without him noticing. Don't, he whispered, and I realized he wasn't talking to us. He was talking to the screen, like the screen could hear. The voice came again, soft as a tide pulling. Open. Nick's eyes glazed for a split second. He leaned forward without meaning to, fingers twitching on the controls like he wanted to drive the ROV right into that door. Rudd grabbed his wrist hard. Stop, he snarled. Nick blinked, startled, then yanked his hand back like it wasn't his. I wasn't. Yes, you were, Rudd snapped. It's getting in your head. It's just a voice, Nick pleaded, and his voice sounded like a man trying to convince himself not to jump overboard. It's just signal bleed, right? Some weird echo. It can't. Lyle grabbed Nick's chin, forced him to look up. You ever been under? He said quietly, dangerously. Nick swallowed. No. You ever felt narcosis? Lyle asked. Ever felt your own brain turn against you because the pressure's too high and your body starts lying to itself? Nick shook his head, eyes wet. Lyle released him with a shove. Then you shut the fuck up and you listen when we tell you it can. Nick wiped his face with the back of his hand, furious and scared. Why are we even here? He snapped. Why not let the Navy handle it from the start? Rudd's voice was low. Because the Navy doesn't like losing their toys in deep water, he said. And because they don't like admitting they built a door on the bottom of the ocean. My stomach lurched. They built that. I asked. Rudd's eyes flicked to me, and for a moment I saw he regretted speaking. They built something, he said carefully, they called a listening post. They said it was for submarines and seismic stuff. Deep ocean acoustics, but they don't pay salvage rates for acoustic monitoring. Lyle's jaw worked. They tested something down there, he said, almost to himself. They pinged too hard, too low frequency. Woke up whatever's been sitting under that grid since before we had boats. The cabin air felt thick. I tasted salt and metal again. The word grid made my skin prickle. Streets, channels, city. Nick's voice broke. So what happens now? Lyle stared at the screen where the doorframe sat, indifferent and patient. Now we do the job, he said. We attach lines. We don't look at the door. We don't go near it. We haul the module up and we get paid. And we go home and we try to forget we ever saw a fucking doorway on the bottom of the ocean. And if it doesn't let us, Nick whispered. Lyle's eyes flicked to the whiteboard rules. Then we don't come home, he said. We got the lines attached. Somehow. Every time the ROV drifted too close to the doorframe, the screen fuzzed with static, like the water itself didn't like being filmed there. The manipulator arm twitched as if something tugged it from the other side of the camera. At one point, the ROV lights flickered, and in that brief dimness, I saw shapes on the seafloor that weren't there when the lights came back on. Tall, thin silhouettes standing in the channels like people waiting on a street corner. When the beam brightened, they were gone. Or maybe they just stepped out of the light. I didn't say it out loud. I just gripped the edge of the console until my fingers hurt. When the lift lines were ready, Lyle radioed for the suits. A different boat arrived an hour later out of the gray, sleek and unmarked, low in the water like it was meant to be invisible. No name, no flag, just a matte hull and men in dark gear who didn't wave. Two of them boarded the Hannah B without asking, moving with the quiet efficiency of people used to being obeyed. They didn't introduce themselves. They didn't shake hands. One carried a hard case. The other carried a tablet and a coil of cable that looked too new for this environment. Lyle's posture changed around them. He got smaller, meaner in a quieter way. The taller one glanced at our screens, then at the whiteboard rules, and his mouth twitched like he found it funny. "Any anomalies?" he asked. Lyle hesitated. "We've got a structure near the module." The man's eyes didn't change. "Describe." Lyle's jaw tightened. "A door," he said, and the word tasted obscene in the cabin. "Door frame. Void beyond." The man nodded once like he'd checked a box. "Do not approach it." "We weren't going to," Lyle said, defensive. The man looked at him. "Good." The other suit opened the hard case and pulled out something that looked like a thick metal puck with cables and a clamp. He set it on the table like a priest laying out an offering. "What is that?" Nick asked, and his voice was too high. The suit looked at him like he was a bug. "Shut up," he said, and then he turned back to his gear. Nick flushed red with humiliation and anger. Rudd put a hand on his shoulder, firm, warning him not to escalate. Nick shrugged it off, but he shut up. The suits installed the puck on our console system, splicing it into the ROV feed. The screen flickered, then stabilized in a way that made my skin crawl. The image got clearer, too clear, like the water had been scrubbed clean. The doorframe on the seafloor looked sharper, the edges too perfect. The suit tapped the tablet, and the sonar ping returned, but it wasn't our sonar. It was lower, deeper, like a whale's heart, like something you feel more than hear. The cabin vibrated. My teeth buzzed. In the back of my mind, that tapping matched the new ping rhythm, and I realized with a sick jolt that it wasn't code we were hearing before. It was a reply. The suit watched the sonar trace with calm eyes. "It's active," he said. Lyle swallowed. "What does that mean?" "It means it's listening," the suit said. He didn't sound scared. He sounded like he was talking about weather. The other suit glanced at the cracked porthole on the screen where the shadow had moved earlier. "Any movement inside?" Rudd's voice was careful. "We saw a shadow behind the glass." The suit's gaze flicked up sharp. "Did you record it?" Lyle hesitated. The system was... The suit stepped forward, suddenly close, and his voice dropped into something that made the hairs on my arms lift. "Did you record it?" Lyle's face went tight. "No," he said. "We didn't." The suit held his stare for a second longer, then nodded as if satisfied. "Good," he said. "Some things don't want to be saved." That sentence made my stomach turn. They sent the divers down. Not in the water. Not like scuba. These were saturation divers. Heavy suits, umbilicals, a whole life support chain. They didn't climb into the sea like people. They descended like equipment. The Hannah B wasn't meant to support that kind of operation, so the unmarked boat took the lead. They rigged a cage. They ran hoses. They set up a decompression system like a small prison bolted to their deck. The whole time, the suits spoke into their mics with calm, clipped voices like they were reading grocery lists. We stayed on the Hannah B, watching screens, helping with lines, doing what we were told. The deeper the divers went, the more the cabin changed. Condensation formed on the walls even though the heater ran. It gathered in beads and slid down like sweat. The bleach smell sharpened until it made my eyes water. Then, Under it, the brine smell from that night in the shop returned, thick and warm and rotten, as if depth had a scent and it was climbing up through cables. Nick kept wiping his hands on his pants. "I don't like this," he muttered. "No shit," I said. Red shot me a look. "Don't antagonize him." Nick's eyes flashed. "Antagonize? I'm the one keeping the ROV stable while I keep you from doing something stupid." Rudd cut in. His voice was controlled but hard. "You almost drove us into the door." Nick's face twisted, shame and rage fighting. "I didn't mean to." "Doesn't matter," Rudd said. "Out here, intent doesn't mean a damn thing." Nick slammed his fist lightly against the console, then immediately looked terrified he'd made noise. "I just want to go home," he whispered. The diver feed crackled in at that moment, saving us from whatever fight was about to happen. "Visual on module," a voice said through the speaker. It was distorted by depth, but steady. "Approaching hatch." The ROV camera showed the divers as bulky silhouettes in the beam, moving slow and controlled near the habitat. Their suit lights made the amber portholes look sickly. The hatch was still cracked. The lead diver reached toward it with a gloved hand. In my head, the tapping started again, matching his movement. "Top, top, top." The diver's hand paused. "Something's wrong," Nick whispered. Rudd's jaw clenched. "Shut up." The diver spoke again, voice strained now. Hearing something through the hull. The suit on the unmarked boat's comms replied, calm as ever. "Ignore it. Do not engage. Proceed with clamp." The diver hesitated. His helmet light swept across the straight channels in the seafloor. For a second, the beam caught something tall and thin standing there. Then the beam moved and it was gone. The diver's breathing quickened in the mic, seeing movement. "Proceed," the suit repeated. The diver's hand went to the hatch. From the module, a stream of bubbles surged suddenly, as if something inside had exhaled hard. And then the tapping turned into a slam. Not on the hull above us, on the module. A deep, resonant bang that shook the ROV feed so hard the camera jittered. Nick yelped. I fell to my feet through the deck like the sea itself had kicked. The diver jerked back. "Contact," he barked. Something hit. His sentence cut off as the comms filled with a sound that made my blood go cold. A sobbing. The same wet, clogged sobbing I'd heard in the alley trash heap. Only now it came through a diver's helmet mic, deep underwater, miles away from my town. Nick went white. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no." The suit on the comms snapped. "Ignore audio. Do not respond." The sobbing turned into a voice, distorted, gurgling. "Open." The diver's breathing hitched. "What the hell?" "Proceed," the suit said again, but now his voice had a hairline crack in it, like impatience or fear slipping through. The diver reached again, fingers curling around the hatch edge. The hatch opened. Not fully, just a little more. Darkness inside, the module shifted like something behind curtain. The diver's helmet light shone into the gap. Inside, for a split second, I saw a dry hallway. Not flooded, not full of water. A dry, square hallway with a floor and walls and a faint amber light, like an office corridor. And at the end of that hallway, there were shapes standing close together. Not divers, not human silhouettes exactly. Too still, too thin, like statues. The feed glitched. Static tore across the screen. The hallway vanished, replaced by murky black and bubbles. Nick's voice broke into a panicked laugh. That's not possible," he babbled. "It can't be dry. It can't." Rudd grabbed him hard by the collar. "Look at me," he snarled. "Look at me. You keep it together." Nick's eyes were wild. "Did you see it? Did you see the hallway?" I couldn't answer. My tongue felt too big. My brain was trying to chew the image and choking on it. The diver's voice came back through the mic, trembling now. I'm hearing people talking." The suit's voice sharpened. "Do not answer. They sound like," the diver inhaled, shaky. "They sound like my wife." My skin went cold. That was Rule 2, spoken out loud. Nick whispered, "Oh my God." Rudd's grip tightened until Nick winced. "Don't," Rudd said through his teeth, not sure who he was talking to anymore. "Don't you fucking answer." The diver's breathing got fast, ragged. She's saying my name." The sobbing returned underneath his words, wet and desperate, like a mouth trying to speak through mud. "Open." The diver's voice rose, cracking. "She's telling me to open the inside door." The suit on comms barked, "Abort. Pull back. Now." The diver hesitated, and that hesitation killed him. Something moved out of the hatch gap. Fast, pale, wrong. It didn't look like a hand. It looked like a cluster of wet tissue shaped like a hand. Fingers too many, joints bending wrong, slapping against the suit. The diver screamed. The ROV feed shook violently as the diver thrashed. His scream cut off into a choking, bubbling sound. His suit light spun, beams whipping across the seafloor, catching glimpses of those straight channels, those tall silhouettes now closer than they'd been before, standing at the edge of the light like they were waiting their turn. The comms erupted with orders, clipped and frantic. "Pull him back. Cut umbilical if needed. Hold position." It all blurred. The diver's mic filled with a grinding sound. Metal on metal, like something scraping his helmet. Then a clear, calm voice spoke through his comm. Not the suit's voice. Not the diver's voice. A voice that sounded like dawn on that Sunday in the shop. Cold, clear, close. "Open," it said almost kindly. The diver's scream stopped. The feed went dead. Static hissed through the cabin like a storm. Nick started sobbing, quiet and broken. "Oh fuck," he whispered. "Oh fuck, oh fuck." Rudd let go of him and stared at the dead screen, face blank like something in him had shut down. Lyle was on the radio, swearing into it, demanding updates from the unmarked boat. His voice was shaking now, too. No anger left, just the panic of a man realizing he's not in control of the water. The suit's voice finally came through again, clipped tight. "Recover Diver 2. Maintain distance from structure. Do not approach the door." Door. The word made my stomach flip, because on our screen, even through static, I saw the door frame again. It hadn't been near the module before. Now it was closer. The straight channels on the seafloor looked sharper, more defined, as if the silt had been brushed away, as if something was cleaning a path. Nick wiped his face, eyes red. "It moved," he croaked. Rudd nodded once, slow. "Yeah," he said. "It moved." All turned on me suddenly, eyes wild. He snapped. "You saw that shop, didn't you?" My throat tightened. "What?" "You fucking reacted when we saw the porthole," he hissed. "You know something? You've been near it." "I don't know what it is." I shot back, fear turning to heat. "I heard shit. I ran." "That's it." I'll step closer. Too close. I could smell cigarette smoke on his breath, and under it, the same brine rot that was seeping into the cabin air. "Dawn picked you," he said, voice low. "Didn't she?" I stared at him. "What does that mean?" Rudd's voice cut in, quiet but deadly. "Stop," he warned Lyle. Lyle ignored him. "She picked you up from her shop," he said, jabbing a finger at my chest. "She didn't pick up the last guy from her shop. She picked him up from the marina, like normal. Then he didn't come back." Nick looked up, sniffling. "What last guy?" Lyle's jaw clenched. "Doesn't matter," he said, but it did. It mattered because the ocean was full of missing people, and now my name was joining the list in my head. I felt my anger flare. "Why are you acting like this is my fault?" I snapped. "You brought me here. You knew the rules. You knew something was wrong." Lyle's face contorted. "I know enough to stay alive," he spat. "I know enough to follow the fucking arrangement." "What arrangement?" I shouted. The cabin felt suddenly smaller, walls wet with condensation, screens humming, the engine throbbed like a heartbeat. Outside, the sea sat too calm, as if listening. Lyle slammed his hand against the whiteboard so hard the marker squeaked. "The arrangement that keeps it down there," he snarled. "The arrangement that keeps it from climbing up through every drain in that town and eating everybody who thinks they're too good to worship." The word worship hit me like a slap. I saw the church cross again, Christ saves hammered into steel. I saw the old folks filing in with their black eyes, their tight skin. I heard that low murmur like waves. Nick whispered, horrified, "What the fuck are you talking about?" Rudd's face tightened. "Lyle," he said again, warning. Lyle didn't stop. "Dawn keeps the door fed," he said, voice shaking with fury and fear. "Dawn keeps the water from turning in town. She makes sure it gets what it wants, so it doesn't take what it wants." My stomach dropped into my feet. I thought of Dawn whispering, "It gets hungry." I thought of the alley trash heap, warm and sucking, sobbing my name. "You're saying," my voice cracked, "you're saying she feeds at people." Lyle's eyes were bright, almost feverish. "People fall off docks all the time," he snapped. "People drown. People go missing at sea. You think the ocean gives receipts?" Nick looked like he was going to vomit. No, no, no. That's insane." Rudd finally stepped between us, shoulders squared. "Enough," he growled. "You're gonna get us all killed talking like this." Lyle jerked away like he'd been burned. He ran a hand over his face, breathing hard. "Fuck," he muttered. "Fuck." The suit's voice came through the radio again. "We are aborting recovery," he said. "Module remains. You will disengage and return to port." Lyle snapped upright. "We can't just leave it." "You will," the suit replied flat. "Secondary protocol initiated." "What's that mean?" Lyle demanded. Silence for a beat. Then the suit said, "We will close it." My stomach turned. Close it how? You don't close the ocean. You don't close a door on the bottom of a trench without paying a price. Lyle's face went gray. "No," he whispered. "No, don't." The suit cut him off. "Return to port." The unmarked boat began moving away, its engines low and steady. It didn't wait for us. Lyle stood frozen, staring at the radio like it had betrayed him. "Those bastards," he whispered. "Those bastards are gonna..." Rudd grabbed his shoulder. "Start the engines," he said. "We leave now." Lyle looked at him with a kind of helpless rage. "If they do what I think..." Rudd's voice went hard. "Start the engines." Lyle moved like a man underwater, slow and heavy. He fired up the Hannah-B, the engine throb resuming like a pulse. The boat began to turn, deck tilting under my feet. On the screen, the ROV feed still showed the module, the hatch cracked, the doorframe nearby. As we pulled away, the doorframe seemed to tilt, not physically, but in perspective like it was turning to face us. The voice came through the speakers one last time, softer now, almost intimate. "Open." Nick clapped his hands over his ears. "Stop," he begged. "Stop." The ROV feed cut out suddenly, clean, abrupt. Black screen. Lyle yanked the cable hard, hauling in the tether like a man pulling a line out of a shark's mouth. We left the coordinates behind, the sea calm and endless. For a while, nothing happened. No tops, no voices, just the engine and the wind and the taste of salt. I almost let myself believe we'd escaped. Then the water around us started glowing. Not bright, not like bioluminescent waves you see on vacation. This was a deep, oily blue glow under the surface, pulsing in slow bands like something huge turning beneath us. Nick leaned over the rail, trembling. "What is that?" Lyle's face went tight. "Don't stare," he said automatically, like the rule was a reflex. But I couldn't look away. The glow moved with purpose, not like random plankton. It formed patterns, lines, grids, spirals, complex enough that my brain tried to interpret them as language. As the bands pulsed, my head filled with that pressure again. My ears ached. My teeth buzzed. Top, top, top. The tapping wasn't on metal. It was in my body, matching the pulses under the water, like my heart was being forced into a different rhythm. Nick swayed forward, hands gripping the rail. His eyes went glassy. "It's beautiful," he whispered, and his voice sounded wrong, too soft, too dreamy. Rudd grabbed him by the back of the vest and yanked him away from the rail hard enough to make him yelp. "Snap out of it," Rudd barked. Nick blinked, confused, then started crying again. I don't know why Lyle's voice was tight. "Get inside," he snapped. "All of you. Cabin. Now." We stumbled into the cabin and shut the door. The boat continued moving, engine steady, but the glow still seeped through the portholes like cold light through a flooded room. Inside, the air felt even wetter. Condensation dripped from the ceiling now, not in random beads, but in steady, deliberate drops that hit the floor in the same spot, like a clock. Drip, drip, drip. Rudd stared at the dripping like it offended him. It followed, he muttered. Nick hugged himself, shaking. It can't follow. It's the ocean. Lal laughed once, bitter. It's been the ocean longer than you've been alive, he said. You think it can't follow? I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. No service should have been out there. We were far offshore, beyond the range of towers. But my phone buzzed again. I pulled it out with numb fingers. The screen lit up. A notification. No caller ID. No number. Just a blank contact. And the message was one word. Open. My throat closed. My hands went cold. No. You whispered. What? Nick sobbed. I turned the phone screen toward them. Rudd's face drained. Lal stared at it like it was a gun pointed at his head. Throw it, Lal snapped. What? Throw it overboard, he shouted. Now. I hesitated for half a second, stupidly, like a message could be evidence. Like I could show someone later and they'd believe me. That half second cost me. The cabin door handle rattled. Not from waves. Not from wind. A deliberate jiggle, like someone testing if it was locked. Talp, talp, talp. The tapping moved up the door frame, slow and patient. Nick screamed, a thin, high sound. Someone's out there. No one's out there, Rudd said, and his voice shook for the first time. No one could be out there. The handle rattled again, and then a voice came through the cabin walls, muffled but clear enough to make my blood freeze. It was Don's voice. You can come back, it said softly. You can come home. Nick stared at the door like it was a mouth. Ow, how is she? Lyle grabbed the fire axe mounted in the cabin, yanked it free with a clang. Back up, he ordered. What are you doing? I croaked. What I should have done years ago, he hissed. He stepped toward the door, axe raised, jaw clenched like he was about to fight the ocean itself. Rudd grabbed his arm. Don't, he snapped. Rule 1. You don't tap back. You don't engage. Lyle jerked free. Fuck your rules, he snarled. Rules didn't save that diver. The voice outside the door sighed, almost amused. You're tired, it said. Open. The handle turned. Not violently. Not forced. Like someone with a key. Lyle swung the axe. The blade bit into the door frame with a crack, splintering wood, metal shuddering. The impact jolted my arms, even though I wasn't holding it. The cabin filled with the smell of wet wood and rust. The tapping stopped. For one heartbeat, silence. Then the voice outside changed. It dropped lower. The static edge returned. It sounded less like Dawn and more like the thing beneath her voice. You shouldn't have done that, it said. The cabin lights flickered. The engine stuttered once, like it had swallowed water. Nick screamed again, incoherent. Rudd grabbed Lyle by the collar and slammed him back against the wall. You stupid son of a bitch. Rudd roared. You want it in here? Lyle's face was twisted with rage and terror. It's already in here, he spat. Look at the fucking walls. He was right. Water was seeping down the cabin walls in thin lines, even though we were sealed. It ran from the ceiling seams, from the corners, from behind the whiteboard, like the boat was sweating seawater. The drops hit the floor and spread in little puddles that reflected the cabin lights weirdly, like mirrors showing a different angle. In one of those puddles, I saw the cracked porthole again, the shadow behind it, the dry hallway, and I saw myself standing at the end of that hallway, looking back. My stomach lurched. I stumbled away from the puddle. The voice outside the door whispered again, almost tender. You were desperate, it said. You asked for work. My phone buzzed again in my hand, the screen flashing open like a pulse. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. My head filled with pressure like I was sinking fast, ears screaming to equalize. Talp, talp, talp. Inside my skull. Nick dropped to his knees, sobbing. Make it stop, he begged. Please make it stop. Rudd's eyes were wild. He grabbed my shoulders suddenly hard. You, he growled. It's talking to you. I shook my head, tears stinging. It's talking to all of us. No, he snapped. It picked you up from her shop. It's using your voice line. He leaned in, breath hot, desperate. What did you do in that alley? My chest tightened. I fell. I whispered. I touched it. Rudd's grip tightened. You let it taste you. He hissed, and his voice broke. You let it know you. Lyle laughed, hoarse. That's it, he murmured. That's the new arrangement. Nick looked up, horrified. What does that mean? Lyle stared at me, eyes bloodshot. It means Dawn's done feeding it with strangers, he said. It means it wants someone who knows its name. I don't know its name. I whispered. The cabin door creaked, not opening but flexing like something leaned against it from the outside. The voice whispered, closer now, as if it was right against the wood. You do, it said. You heard in the drain. You heard it in the knock. You wrote it down in your little notebook while you drank her coffee. My blood turned to ice. My notebook. I left it in low tide that Sunday when I ran. I'd never gone back for it. I told myself it was just paper. In it, I'd scribbled stupid lines about the wind speaking, about the way the tapping felt like language. I'd written the rhythm out in marks, tap, 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 slash pause, slash tap, like code, like a name, and now was telling me it had read it. The cabin lights flickered again, then held steady. The engine caught back up, throbbed stronger. The sea outside slapped the hull like applause. Rudd released me slowly, face twisted like he wanted to kill me and also wanted me to save him. What do we do? He whispered. Not to me exactly. To the room. Lyle's voice was flat now, exhausted. We go back, he said. Nick sobbed. No. Lyle ignored him. He stared at the door where the axe blade was sunk into the frame. We go back to Dawn, he said. We put him on the dock. We let her do whatever she does. We keep it from turning on us. You're talking about sacrificing him, I croaked. Lyle's eyes flashed. You think the ocean doesn't take sacrifices? He snapped. You think ships don't go down so other ships can keep running? You think people don't disappear every day and nobody notices because it keeps the rest of the world moving? Nick surged up, shaking with fury. Fuck you, he spat. Fuck you, you psycho. We can call the Coast Guard. We can. The Coast Guard won't come, Rudd said quietly, and the way he said it made Nick stop cold. Not for this. Nick's eyes darted between us. What are you talking about? Rudd looked away, jaw clenched. This zone, he said. Those suits. The door. You think they don't have this wrapped up? You think anyone's going to believe a bunch of deckhands saying the ocean texted them to open a door? Nick's face crumpled. Then what? Silence. Talp, talp, talp. Inside my skull, steady as a heartbeat. The voice outside the cabin door sighed like a wave retreating. You can come home, it repeated. Open. My hand. Without me meaning to, drifted toward the cabin door latch. Rudd grabbed my wrist hard. No, he growled. I tried to pull back, but my muscles didn't feel like mine. It was like watching your own arm move in a dream, slow and inevitable. I gritted my teeth until my jaw hurt. Stop me, I whispered. Rudd's grip tightened until pain shot up my arm. I am, he hissed. Nick backed away, shaking, eyes huge. Oh my God, he whispered. Oh my God, you're... I'll step closer, axe still in his hands, face blank. We're not making it back, he said quietly. What? Nick croaked. Lyle's eyes flicked to the porthole. The oily blue glow outside was stronger now, pulsing faster. The patterns were tighter, more insistent. The sea around us wasn't just glowing. It was moving in that glow, bands sliding under the hull like something circling. We're not going back to port, Lyle said. We're going back to Dawn, or we're going down. The words hung in the wet air. Rudd's eyes were glassy. Turn the boat, he whispered. Nick shook his head violently. No, 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 you can't. Lyle stared at him. You got a better plan? He asked. Nick opened his mouth, then closed it. Tears spilled down his face. He looked like a kid who'd finally understood adults don't always save you. Lyle went to the helm. The Hannibee turned. The engine groaned as it shifted course. The porthole view changed, the sea bands sliding away for a moment as if annoyed, then following like a shadow. As soon as the bow pointed back toward land, the tapping in my skull eased slightly. The pressure in my ears lessened. I could breathe again, shallow and shaky. The voice outside the cabin door faded, like it had gotten what it wanted. "Good," it whispered, distant now. "Good." We ran back through gray water. The glow gradually dimmed, retreating beneath the hull as if sinking back into depth. The cabin walls stopped sweating. The puddles on the floor dried faster than they should have, leaving salt stains. Nobody spoke. Nick just sat on the deck with his head in his hands. Rudd stared at the horizon like he was trying to burn a hole through fog. Lyle smoked cigarette after cigarette, hands shaking less now that he'd chosen a path, even if it was a monstrous one. I stood near the rail, gripping it, staring at the water. Every time the hull creaked, I flinched like I expected a knock. As the shoreline finally emerged out of fog, my stomach twisted. The town looked exactly the same from the water, dead, gray, tight-lipped. The lighthouse tooth on the point, the church cross on the hill, the harbor pilings like black ribs. Low tide's window glowed even in daylight, warm and inviting like a lie. We docked at the industrial pier. No one else was there. No other boats moving. No guys screaming. The harbor felt too quiet, like the town was holding its breath. Dawn stood at the end of the pier, waiting. She wasn't in the doorway this time. She was outside on the boards above black water, hands in her sweatshirt pockets, hair slicked back. Her face looked calm. Her eyes looked almost kind. Almost. Lyle jumped off first, rope in hand, tying us up fast like he couldn't wait to be done. Dawn watched him without speaking. When Lyle finally looked up at her, his voice cracked. "It's turning," he said. Dawn nodded once, slow. "I know," she said. Nick stumbled off next, shaking. "Please," he blurted, voice raw. "Please, there's something out there. There's a..." Dawn raised a hand, and Nick stopped mid-sentence like he'd hit a wall. "Hush," she said softly. "Don't throw words at water." Nick stared at her, horrified, then backed away as if she'd slapped him. Rudd got off quietly, eyes fixed on the boards. He didn't look at Dawn. It was my turn. My legs felt heavy as I stepped onto the pier. The boards were damp, slick with algae. The water below slurped quietly against pilings, black and thick. Dawn's gaze locked onto me. For a second, the world narrowed to just her eyes, dark and needlepoint, and the pressure in my ears returned like a tide. "You came back," she said. "I didn't want to," I whispered. Her mouth twitched. "No one ever does." Lyle cleared his throat behind me. "We can't," he began, then swallowed hard. "We can't keep doing this." Dawn didn't look at him. "Then don't," she said. "Go inland. Buy a house away from drains. Pray you never hear tapping again." Lyle's face contorted. "What about him?" He jerked his chin at me. Dawn finally glanced at Lyle, and her eyes were cold. "You brought him," she said. "You followed the arrangement." Lyle's voice broke into anger. "You fucking set it up." Dawn's smile slipped into something sharp. "Watch your mouth," she said, and for a second her voice had that deeper resonance under it, like two frequencies at once. Lyle shut up immediately, like someone had flicked a switch in his brain. Nick whispered, "What is she?" Rudd hissed, "Shut up." Dawn stepped closer to me, and the bleach smell hit me again, harsh and clean. Her sweatshirt pocket bulged slightly, as if something heavy was inside. "Do you hear it now?" she asked quietly. I swallowed. The harbor water below us seemed to pulse, slow, as if matching a heartbeat. "Yes," I whispered. She nodded, satisfied. "Good," she said. "That means it chose right." "I'm not going in your shop," I said, and the words came out louder than I meant, edged with panic. I'm not doing whatever you do back there." Dawn's eyes softened in a way that didn't feel human. "You already did," she said. My stomach dropped. "What?" She reached into her pocket and pulled out my notebook. The one I'd left behind. The cover was warped from moisture. Salt stains bloomed across it like mold. The pages were swollen, edges stuck together like wet tissue. My throat closed. "How did you?" "I cleaned it up," she said casually. "Bleach works on paper too, if you're careful." She flipped it open. Pages crinkled. I saw my own handwriting, smeared, warped, still legible in places. The tapping marks, the rhythm, the little nonsense lines about wind. And on one page, the thing I'd written half as a joke, half as a dare to myself, because the rhythm felt like a name and my brain wanted to pin it down. Open, not the word, the idea, the sound, the permission. Dawn tapped that page with her finger. Top, top, top. The tapping in my skull answered, 3 beats like a reflex. Nick made a strangled sound. Rudd swore under his breath. Dawn's eyes stayed on mine. You named it, she said softly. Or it let you think you did. Either way, it heard you. I didn't mean. My voice cracked. I didn't know. Dawn's face hardened. Nobody knows, she said. They just want. They just take. They just beg the water to stop being hungry. Lyle's voice trembled. So what now? Dawn looked over my shoulder at the harbor, at the flat gray water, at the fog thinning over the channel. Now we keep it from turning, she said. Now we close what they opened. Nick shook his head, tears streaming again. No, he whispered. No, you can't do this to him. Dawn glanced at Nick like he was a gull screaming. You want to volunteer? She asked. Nick choked and backed away, stumbling. Rudd's jaw worked like he was chewing on something bitter. He looked at me, and his eyes were full of something that might have been apology. I'm sorry, he whispered. Lyle didn't look at me at all. He stared at the boards like he couldn't bear to see my face. My chest tightened. So that's it, I said. You're all just going to hand me over. Dawn's eyes flicked back to me. You're not being handed over, she said. You're being hired. The words hit me like cold water. What? I croaked. Dawn lifted my notebook slightly. Work, she said. It asked for work. It asked for someone who listens. Someone who hears tapping and doesn't run. Someone desperate enough to open doors without knowing what's behind them. My throat closed. No. Dawn's smile returned, small and practiced. Yes, she said. You'll stay at low tide. You'll keep the lights on. You'll make coffee. You'll wipe bleach on tile. You'll watch the door and back, and you'll listen for the slam. And when it knocks, you'll do what I did. My stomach churned. Feed it. Dawn's eyes didn't blink. Keep it down, she corrected. Nick made a broken sound. This is insane. Rudd grabbed Nick's arm and pulled him back toward the boat. Don't, he hissed. Don't make it notice you. Nick yanked free. Fuck you, he spat, sobbing. Fuck all of you. He looked at me, eyes wild. Run, he begged. Just run. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But my feet didn't move. Because beneath the pier, beneath the black harbor water, something tapped. Top, top, top. Not on wood. On the inside of my bones. Dawn leaned closer. Her breath smelled like coffee and bleach and sea. If you run, she whispered, it will follow you through every drain, every pipe, every glass of water you ever drink. It will knock in your bathroom. It will whisper in your sink. It will call you deeper until you open something you can't close. My eyes burned. How do you know? Dawn's smile twitched into something like grief. Because it followed me once, she said, and I came back. She straightened and gestured toward low tide's door. The shop window glowed. The surgical tile shone. The back door sat in its usual place, quiet and waiting like a hatch in a hull. My legs moved. Not fast. Not like a zombie. Like a man walking to his own job interview because his rent is due and he's tired of fighting the tide. Nick grabbed my sleeve. Please, he choked. I looked at him, and for a second I saw what I must look like, pale, eyes too dark around the edges, salt crusted on my lips, the ocean's rhythm in my pulse. I wanted to tell him I was sorry. I wanted to tell him to burn the boat, burn the town, burn the church, burn the whole coastline down to the bedrock. I wanted to tell him to get as far inland as humanly possible and never take a shower again. Instead, I just said, don't tap back, because it was the only mercy I could offer. Nick sobbed harder. Rudd dragged him away. Lyle climbed onto the Hannah B without looking back, like he'd just delivered cargo. Dawn opened the shop door and stepped aside. Inside, the bleach smell hit me like a wave. The floor gleamed. The fluorescence buzzed. The drip above the back door hit the tile, steady and patient. Drip, drip, drip. Dawn's voice behind me was soft. Welcome, she said. I walked to the back booth like I'd done 100 times before, like muscle memory, like a ritual. My hands trembled. My tongue tasted salt and metal. Behind a swinging door to the back, something shifted. A wet gurgle. Then a metallic slam rolled through the shop, deep and resonant, like a hole being struck from outside. Dawn didn't flinch. I did. The lights flickered once, then held. From a back room, the tapping began. Talp, 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 and through the walls, through the floor, through the town itself. I felt the old folks on the hill in the church, murmuring like waves, eyes black, skin tight, pretending it was worship and not maintenance. The tapping came again, closer. Talp, talp, talp. Dawn's voice was low in my ear. "It's hungry," she said. "Now you decide what enough means." The back door handle rattled, gentle as a request. My hand rose toward it, shaking. On the polished tile beneath my boots, the fluorescent light reflected in a thin puddle that hadn't been there a second ago. In that puddle, I saw a hallway, dry, amber lit, and at the end of it, a city of straight lines and impossible towers, waiting under an ocean that had always been listening. And somewhere deep inside that reflection, something leaned close and knocked from the other side. Talp, talp, talp.